from everybody I met in the stock brokerage industry. And I learned this early on in the stock brokerage industry because I like to do that 30,000 foot view, like you're up in an airplane looking down. And what I noticed in the stock brokerage industry was the same thing I noticed at my dad's real estate company when I was a kid, was you always had this group of men and women outside smoking cigarettes. This is very common in the late 60s, 70s, and 80s, early to mid 90s. So there I was in my dad's real estate office. I would show up. You'd have a big group of people out smoking cigarettes and all talking. Same thing in the mortgage industry. Same thing in the stock brokerage industry. And I remember thinking to myself, well, if I don't spend that time smoking cigarettes each day, I'm that much better off than they are. So it wasn't about talent. For me, it was about applying myself to what I was up to that day, which was what I called my responsibilities. Well, I had a list of responsibilities that I had each day, no different than I do all these years later. Now, looking back on that list of responsibilities I had to take care of back then, what was interesting was I was immature when it came out to making out my list. Because what I was putting in my list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, listing them all on the left-hand side of a yellow pad of paper. What I was putting on the list was I was putting not only things I had to do today, but things I had to do next week, things I wanted to do in the future. And in addition, what I found on an ongoing basis was that what I intended to get to that day, I didn't get to that day. Oftentimes I'd have 40, 50, 60% of those items left on that list. So one day it dawned on me after a long period of time, a tremendously long period of time, that your list and my list exist of 3 different periods in our lives. What we have to do right now, which is what I call my WIN theory, an acronym or an abbreviation, WIN, what's important now, okay? So that should be on your list, at the top of your list. The shit that's not important now should be at the bottom of your list. Well, you know what I started to do was I started to move that over to the right and not put it on today's list. Or if I was going to put it on today's list, I divided the list in 3 categories. From 8 a.m. until noon, from noon until 3, and from 3 until 6 p.m. And so all of a sudden I started to recognize I was working on things on my list that I really didn't need to get to right now. I needed to get to them later today, or maybe not this week. You know, maybe this was a long-term goal as opposed to a medium-term goal or a short-term goal. So my talent became managing the things I had to do. And then my talent became doing the things I had to do. Now, you and I can hear again and again and again about the word discipline. I mean, you don't have to look very far and people are talking or touting about discipline, all right? And when you look at the word discipline, it's the practice of training people or yourself to obey rules, standards, or behavior, often using punishment. Now listen to that. Punishment for correction. So let me say it again without interrupting myself. Discipline is the practice of training people or yourself to obey standards or behavior, often using punishment for correction. Well, I got to tell you all, I started to realize how to punish myself with now look, Vincent, you with me, brother? You got to be kind to yourself, though. You with me? You can't take a metaphorical whip and start whipping yourself with it and saying, shame on you, Vincent, or shame on you, Kashi, or shame on you, Brett, or Edgar, or Keith, or Darius. You didn't get it done. You gotta have a certain amount of empathy and sympathy for yourself, because at the end of the day, folks, we're no different than a crow. If you watch a crow in a tree and you see a filbert nut fall down onto the ground, that crow, it doesn't matter if there's traffic or not, by God, he's going to get that nut. You know, same thing with a bottle cap. I've seen it before. A bottle cap in the olden days when we had bottles with caps on top of them, like pop bottles. They'd be rolling down the street. Someone would throw them out of the car back when we were able to litter in the 70s and the 60s and the early 80s. You're Vincent, you're laughing. Remember those days? Dude, I remember my dad would literally take a container of our McDonald's food driving down the street, and he'd throw them out the window. Swear to God. You're laughing, Kashi. We used to do this. In fact, this is the most bizarre thing. At View Acres Elementary School, Edgar, this is a trip. In the 6th grade, it would have been about 1972, we had a contest. Now, this was Milwaukee. This was not the United States. Only the 6th graders. There weren't that many of us. There was only 928 total 6th graders. And then we had this contest to find 1 million bottle caps in one school year period. And by God, guys and gals, we came up with 1.29 million bottle caps. That's how many people would just open their bottle cap. They were laying on the road. Everywhere you went, there was a bottle cap on the road. They were on the side roads. They were on the main roads. Where were they coming from? What was happening is people opening them up, throwing them out of their car. I mean, not that many people were walking around the street back then, opening them up and throwing them out on the street as they were walking. So they're obviously coming out of the cars, beer bottles, pop bottles, bottle caps. Just think about that for a moment. You know, do any of you remember bottle caps being everywhere back then? They were everywhere. They were, cigarette butts were everywhere. You know, I get such a kick out of these people telling me, you know, we've got to be greener. We've got to be greener. We've got to be greener. It's like, hey, man, you're not 65. You don't remember driving down the road and seeing people throw their McDonald's out, their Kentucky Fried Chicken, containers out. It didn't matter what was in the car, you threw it out. And there was no shame in our game. There was none. There was no guilt. No, but I remember coming home, and it was would have been probably about 1996, 1997, and my son introduced me to a seatbelt. I didn't wear seatbelts. I'm driving cars that go 150 miles an hour. I didn't wear a seatbelt. But every time those kids got in the car, those schools had drilled it in their heads, seatbelts. The following year, like clockwork, God is my witness, recycling came about, and this old man and my old lady, we had to start recycling. And those kids were on our ass. It was the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. We had a recycling bin next to a garbage can. I couldn't comprehend it. I came from a world where we threw stuff out on the streets. Okay? Can you change? Can I change? All you have to do is recognize that what you're doing is not what you want to be doing. And then it's a vacuum. If you don't fill something in with what you want to be doing, then there'll just be this vortex and something will fill in. So you have to take charge of that. Now, I learned that psychologically at a young age because I found again and again and again, there were certain aspects of me that I didn't like about me. I didn't want to be mean to you, Edgar. I didn't want to be mean to you, Elaine, the rest of you, Kashi, Vincent, Darius. I can't see the other people on here. I didn't want to be mean to you. But I grew up with a mother, and I'm going to use the word witch rather than bitch. My mom was a witch. Honest to God, she was a witch. Somehow,
that is so funny.
Somehow my mom could see you and what you were doing. Well, never did we realize that it was a neighborhood, a community, and you'd get a phone call. Hey, Brett was throwing rocks at the barn and breaking windows. God, I would get home and be like, how did she know? Well, we had a community. Well, what's so funny is we live in this remote world now. And here I am for the first time with Darius's help, with Darius's talent, since I lack the talent, because I've tried this before and not been able to get it to work. But I can tell each of you, I got to plug in here. My battery's going dead. I got to tell each of you this. There's an old adage, an old story, and that is, where there's a will, there's a way. And that's where I really found that the rubber meets the road. I was surrounded by a group of family that was always saying on my Wycombe side and on the Martin side, God will save you. God will take care of you. Now, this wasn't just instilled in me, folks. This was ingrained in me at a level that was as far as you could go. Whether you were Buddhist, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Mormon, whether you're Protestant or Baptist or Catholic, or you were raised in a Lutheran church like myself, I got it from both sides. Grandma Bertha on the Martin side, Grandma Alice on the Wycombe side. And what I saw always was the typical picture of Jesus Christ in my mind, where you saw that always, just that shoulder view on up, kind of a whitish brown guy with dark hair, with long hair. And the other thing I saw was the backside of Jesus Christ. That's how I pictured God, as the devil, and that the devil was going to get me. God was going to get me. Now, it took me fundamentally from the time I was 17 and a half years old till the time I was about 33 or 34 in my notes. That's almost 17, 18 years, where I finally realized God is not out to get me, just as well as God is not out to get you. Hell, we do a good enough job of getting ourselves. And I started to realize, I'm like, you are the problem here, Brett. And then of all things, years later, this methamphetamine addict who begged me for a job because he was in rehab and got fixed, to be the leader of my company in the construction industry, named Joe Hanna, came up with this saying driving down the road he'd known for years. And he said to me, Brett, you are the problem, you are the solution to the problem, and therein lies the problem. I am the problem. I am the solution to the problem, and therein lies the problem. It might have been one of the most poetic things I'd ever heard in my life. Now, look, I could say to you, and so could you, no, you got to let go and let God. Well, I got to tell you something. God, even if you're an atheist, understand, big boom, whatever, coming up out of the ocean, whatever it is, from my perspective, the bottom line is there's some certain rules that are put in place. As an example, Edgar, you and I are having a cold beer tonight. We're sitting on the top of the Eiffel Tower or sitting on top of the Empire State Building. And if you and I decide to hold hands and jump off, hey, bro, we're going to die. right? We're dead. I mean, welcome to God. Welcome to the consistency of God, or the consistency of the laws of physics, or the laws of the universe, or gravity, whatever you want to call it, okay? The world works that way. I need those definitive rules, or I'm fucked. Excuse my language. I'm fucked. And so what I started to do was something that I saw at a very early age in my dad's real estate office, and that was up on the wall. There was a placard, and Tradewinds Realty that he owned with 4 partners had a mission statement. So I wrote a mission statement for myself. Now, I got to tell you, I've made many adjustments to that mission statement over the years, but I find myself making far less adjustments to that mission statement now than I ever have. Now, categorically, I cover more than one category, which means I have to have a mission statement for my marriage. I have to have a mission statement for my children. I have to have a mission statement for my business. I have to have a mission statement for each of these specific areas that I involve myself in, as should you. And you do. Believe it or not, you do. It may not be written, but the bottom line is, you know what you're up to and what you're expecting out of yourself when you go out with the guys and meet up at so-and-so, or rotate houses, and you're playing poker on Tuesday nights. I mean, you've got a mission in mind. No different than a mission in mind for coming into this industry and making money. All right. So I think it's very important that you understand it's almost like a pyramid, that at the top, there's got to be a note that says, this is what I want. This is what I'm up to. A mission statement. Now, I've been involved in about 227 to 229,000 people's lives that have been on my platforms in the mortgage industry and this industry. And what I find is a common denominator with almost every one of those people, probably at least 90%. Only about 10% of those people have this. The other 90% don't. And that is this ability to be able to say, I'm going to set rules for myself, and I'm going to obey those rules. Guidelines, a roadmap. Now look, it is not difficult at all for you, ladies and gentlemen, to get in the car and go to your mom's house, or get in the car and go to the grocery store. You don't need a roadmap for that. Okay? But just imagine if all of a sudden, out of the blue, you're in a scenario where you've got a different place you've got to go and you haven't been there before. What do? We pick up one of the phones, we type in the address, and now it gives us the directions. It either talks to us, some of us read the directions, old style, but the bottom line is they're there. Does anyone remember the days of the Thomas Guide?
Yes.
Ricardo, was that you or Sam?
Sam.
Yeah, so you and I remember the Thomas Guide. You and I thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread, right?
Yep, I miss it.
I miss it too, brother. There you are. Peace. Love the hat and the glasses, dude. You're a sharp-looking guy. Yeah, I miss it. The thing is about the Thomas Guide, it's kind of like the Dewey Decimal System. I wish they had something like that on Google. Because what you can do, it's almost like a detective environment where you could chisel down to getting what you wanted. Okay? I mean, I can't begin to tell you guys and gals how many times when I have free time on my hands and I get on the computer and my mind says, I want to Google something, it's like, well, what am I going to Google? I mean, I've just about Googled everything under the sun. So I find myself again and again and again going back to the same old stuff I've been part of. Well, I can tell you right now, I'm coming out of one of the most brutal, dark periods of my life, as dark as it's ever been, following this cancer, following COVID, following the lockdowns, a tremendous amount of mean people everywhere I look. I mean, I don't care if it was Obama. I don't care if it was Clinton. I'm going to give you recent presidents like Bush or Biden or Trump. Vincent, look me in the eye. I couldn't imagine, had you had an attempt on your life last night like Donald Trump, I couldn't imagine in my wildest dreams saying, yay, awesome. You're with me, brother, you're smiling. You get it? I mean, dude, it started last night on my feed and Instagram, and it's all over there now. People, I wish they would have got him. And then the other thing you see everywhere you look is this was all staged. This was all planned, as if Donald Trump has nothing better to do with his time than to stage something like this. In my mind, I can't comprehend it. Did he do it? Could he do it? Hey, I suppose he could. But I want to believe in mankind. I want to believe in humanity. I don't want the wheels to go off in my community brain to the point, Edgar, where I grab my 9mm, okay, and I take my clip and I ram it in my FN and start shooting people. You with me? Come on, brother. There's Vincent grabbing his gun. Amen, dude. I mean, listen, guys, let me tell you something about me. You don't want me shooting people. I got to tell you right now, I would set a world record. The guy in Vegas shooting out of those towers ain't got nothing on me. But you know what? We got a lot of people like this in this country that are that talented. So what keeps us under wraps? What keeps us from strangling each other, killing each other, these types of things? Hey, man, it's sympathy. It's empathy. It's understanding. It's love. Look, if you're grounded in anger, which I found was a common denominator in our family growing up, we were always in drama with a D, and there was always trauma with a T afterwards. I got beat. I got the cigarette burns. I got whipped. I got degraded. I was shamed. And it was just constant. I don't know. Some of you are in the same boat as I was, where Sam has written here, love is the most powerful force in the world. We need to always gravitate back to love. Sam, it's exactly what I have to check in with when I start to look at this stuff, and I'm like, because I want to get involved, Sam. I want to start saying, no, he didn't, or I want to stick up for these people, right? Or I want to, look, there were times when I thought to myself, hey, it appears to me as though maybe Biden has kind of lost his mind. I didn't say great. My God, I can't afford to have this country be in a situation where it goes to shit. I got to live here. My kids got to live here. I started to do things like look at land in Argentina, look at land in Chile. Hell with Canada. If you're moving to Canada, you got to screw loose. You think it's bad here? You go live in Canada. Good luck, folks, because you ain't getting to Canada, even with the proper papers. It taken me 10, 15, 20 hours, 2 to 3 days to get into Canada to go skiing with my family in Whistler. Hell, I can get into Mexico in 2 minutes, and they can get into the United States up until Trump's administration without even having any documentation and all. Try going to Canada. I mean, this is not a large number of people up there. But what do they have? They have rules, they have regulations. And that's the thing that I can tell you, folks. Within the guise of the rules and regulations that are set aside, like speed limits and, thou shalt not, commit murder, and thou shalt not commit adultery, this type of stuff. You got to have your own set of rules for yourself on what you're going to do today, what you're up to today, and if you're in a situation where you're just going to add insult to injury by piling it on Trump or piling it on Biden or piling it on Omar, as opposed to what Sam said, and that is love. Look, Omar needs my help. I want Omar and AOC and Pelosi and Sean Hannity and Rachel Maddow to all sing Kumbaya and Michael, row your boat ashore and quit throwing the trash out the window for you and I to clean up. And so I had to start to look at the world and say, okay, look, here's the deal, Brett. During these hours, you're not going to get involved in all this other rhetoric, all this other propaganda, all this other narrative. So what I had to do, and I started doing this long before social media, way before social media, is I started to develop what I called a Star Trek Enterprise force field. Because back then, Star Trek Enterprise was very common. And I built a force field around myself. Now, was I penetrated every once in a while? Yes. Why? Because I didn't have any borders. I didn't have any force field. What is that word that so many people use with a B? Anyone? Boundaries. I was boundaryless because I grew up in a family that would come into my room without knocking. They would come into the bathroom without knocking. We grew up without boundaries, and I was thrown into the world as an adult without boundaries. And then I had to start to realize that I needed boundaries for myself, and I needed to be in a situation where if you overstepped your boundaries, then I needed to stand my ground convincingly. And it became an honor thing where it was on my honor that I was going to protect my boundaries at all costs. Along comes our children, Grant and Travis. I'm going to protect those children at all costs. I was going to protect my wife, Julie, at all costs, even with my own life. Well, why wouldn't we do this with our business? Why wouldn't we do this with our career? Where we would if we worked at, Tesla. We would if we worked at General Electric and we punched a time clock every day. Time clock, time clock, time clock. I mean, you hear these words in the olden days, Vincent and Brett, they worked for Ford for 39 years. They bleed Ford colors, or they bleed Chevy colors, or they bleed red, white, and blue. They're part of the, military, these types of things. Look, man, you got to bleed your colors. You got to bleed your plan. And that's one of the things I could tell you again and again and again that I found with myself is, even this morning, there I was. My wife was getting off to work. Both the dogs are laying in bed. I'm reading this really good novel right now. I didn't bring it in with me. It's a hell of a novel about a coal mine in 1958 in Russia, and it imploded. Over 1,000 men were stuck, and how this one man acted. But what was so interesting about it was he went back to the safety guidelines. And you laugh and you think to yourself, these safety guidelines don't mean shit. Yeah, they don't, until you and I need them. Until you and I need them. That's why you see the police, ICE, maybe you hate ICE, maybe you love ICE. The FBI, maybe you hate or love them. Maybe you hate or love the police. But what do? They do these routine drills all the time, again and again and again. Because what they realize is during that complacency, that if they're not practicing and working on those guidelines and those rules, the bottom line is they won't be prepared when that comes up. So this morning, what am I talking about? What came up? The same thing that comes up almost for all of us on Monday morning, and that is, oh shit, my back's hurt, my neck's sore, my shoulders are killing me. I really don't want to get up this morning. Maybe I just sit in bed a little bit longer, or maybe I take today off. And then all of a sudden I had to laugh because for me, I'm 64 now. I've been doing this for over 40 years where I just say, get your ass out of bed and let's go now. No fucking around. Get up, get moving, let's go. And you laugh, Vincent, but I can tell you this right now. I was at the Grotto, and it was in Portland. If you look up the Grotto in Portland, it's one of the most amazing places. It's like going up to Victoria, Canada, and going to the rhododendron garden. It's unimaginable. The Grotto's in a fabulous place, a magical place in Oregon, in Portland, Oregon. But there I was in AA thinking I was an alcoholic at 22 years old. And an old man made a comment to me, boy, bring your body and your mind will follow. And I got to tell each of you this. I can't begin to tell you how many times I forced myself to go to Chamber of Commerce meeting. I forced myself to go to a bank. I forced myself to go to, hand out 10 black envelopes to business owners or just flyers without envelopes or forced myself into doing Craigslist. Forced myself to get on this call. There you go, Edgar. Amen, brother. Amen. Yeah. And Edgar, come on. Let's not lie to one another, dude. If we were smoking a joint or a cigarette or having a beer or a glass of orange juice or an apple juice, it ain't fun labeling those black envelopes. Is it? It's a bitch, isn't it? There's nothing fun about it, dude. But I can tell you right now, got a new guy, landed alone, funded it on Friday. What I was telling Darius about this, over $1 million loan amount on his first loan came out of that black envelope. And he was one of those after a week that hit me with an email that said, how long is it going to take? I started laughing. I'm like, it's the mail, for God's sakes. This isn't Amazon. I mean, we get stuff the next day or the day after that from Amazon nowadays. But our postal service, try sending something from Oregon to my son in Brooklyn. There's times it could take up to 10 days. I mean, hell, you can damn near walk there sooner. All right. So on the black envelope, the work you do today will show up at least 7 to 10 days from now, maybe sooner, unless it's in your own hometown. All right. Craigslist could be immediate, but that doesn't mean that if it doesn't happen today, that it won't happen in 5 days or 10 days, the work you do today, which means you live in this environment where you have to have faith. Now, look, I start talking about faith and immediately people start thinking religion, all right? But let's break down faith for a moment. Faith is a strong, often unshakable belief, trust, or confidence in a person, idea, or religion, frequently held without material proof of evidence. There's no proof. There's no evidence. It's almost comical to me. I meet people who want proof. I meet people who want evidence. And there's proof and evidence of stuff going on all over the world. But you show them the proof, you show them the evidence, and they still don't believe you. I mean, this is common. How many times you've been sitting there talking to someone and it's like, well, what is it with this guy? Or what is it with this lady, for Christ's sake? I showed it to him. Now what do we got going on? ChatGPT, we've got AI, and they're oftentimes incorrect. I mean, saw an article the other day. ChatGPT told a kid he needs to kill himself. He was in high school, and he did. He did. He believed in it so much, he did. And I've heard that it's that convincing and that addictive. Now, again, like Darius teaching me about this tool, and he taught me a lot of hours about this tool, Google Meets, okay? What I want to let each of you know is I've chosen not to learn ChatGPT. And here's the only reason why, just to let you know, is since I came in this industry in 2007, got my very first computer, never had one of my own, got my very first email, I bet you there's been 1,000 things like WhatsApp and ChatGPT that have come up. And if I would have followed every one of them, for God's sakes, so many of them went out of style or went by the wayside for whatever reason, like the dodo bird, and became extinct. And I would have been like, you're laughing, Vincent, but it's true. It's like, what one do you follow? Well, here's me. This is the way I am. Until it's pretty much universal out there in the world, I'm not interested. As an example, a great example right now, I don't own an EV car. I'm not against electric cars. I'm not against them. You want to know what I'm against? I'm against nuclear energy where they can't get rid of the waste. They knew that going in. People don't talk about that. They can't get rid of the waste. It lasts forever. Billions of years, they say. Now take a look at these EV batteries. Hell, they're the size of the, half of a trunk of a car. And they weigh umpteen million pounds. They're so expensive that it's cheaper oftentimes to get a new car than it is to get a new battery. So I look at the technology and just say, I'm not ready yet. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean I'm against them for any other reason other than that. I would love to see charging stations everywhere. That's the other thing we have a problem with is my wife and I go up to Crater Lake just before I had my first cancer treatment in case I died. We wanted to go on a couple of quick road trips. And there we are at 4:00. We've gotten to know this couple really well going around Crater Lake. If you've never been to Crater Lake, look it up in Oregon. It's one of the Earth's wonders, one of the deepest lakes in the world. And what's interesting is this gentleman says, we got to go to the store. And I said, okay, well, we'll see you over there. We go to the store. They're parked in line behind about 25 Teslas. There's 2 charging stations. And they close at 8:00. So they're minimizing them down to a quarter charge. Over 70% of those people had ran it down to the point where they weren't going to be able to get back to Bend. They weren't going to be able to get back to Klamath Falls. They weren't going to be able to get back to Medford. Hey, that's a little bit of a problem there. Who didn't think that one up, right? And so I look at it and say, until those charging stations are everywhere, that'd be another reason why I wouldn't get involved. So that being said, I'm just giving you an example here as to why I don't get on to these tools. AI may be something I never use. It may be something I use. But until I really see the benefits of it in a big picture format, until it's really tried and true and fits the mold that I need, would I love to buy a robot that's the perfect wife? Hey, listen, I don't know yet what I'll do when that comes out. Would I love to buy the perfect dog? I don't know. I don't know yet. Would I love to have me be replaced? Look, guys and gals, that's the thing I refuse to be part of. I don't want to lose my feelings, Edward, when I look at your head and say, I like the fact that you and I share something similar. You know, I'm envious of someone like, you know, Vincent that's got a nice head of hair. You know, those days for me are over. But I'm not so vain, Edgar and Vincent, that I'm going to run out and get hair plugs or put on a wig. You know, it is what it is, right? I mean, come on, I'm 64 years old. It's not as though I'm out chasing skirts or guys, for God's sakes. I'm an old man. I'm in the winter months or winter years of my life. And what I've found now more than ever is there's no fooling around with me anymore, boys and girls. That list is a lot smaller. It's a lot shorter. And the interesting thing about it is everything gets done on that list. So those are my little wins. When I talk about talent, talent will only get you so far. I've met a tremendous amount of talented people that are on the sidelines of life. But I can tell you right now, persistence, discipline, and taking action. And if you don't take action, inaction is an action. It's a choice. It's a choice. And so there are going to be repercussions to pay by not taking action. So what I could tell you right now, one of the greatest movies I ever watched in my entire life, I've mentioned it numerous times, is What About Bob with Bill Murray and Richard Dreyfuss. And there's a book that Richard Dreyfuss's character has written called Baby Steps. So if you're not used to managing a list, if you're not used to being persistent, if you're not used to obeying your own rules, don't get out that metaphorical whip and start flogging yourself over and over again. Instead, understand, minimize your list, make it achievable for the day, and maximize your life with the results, because that's when the endorphins and the dopamine is released. That's when there's that euphoria, like an orgasm or a win at the table if you're gambling, or that fix you get when you shove that drug in your vein or smoke that in your pipe or in your bong, or drink that beer and get that feeling after that sixth beer and the seventh one finally puts you where you want to be, or your second glass of wine, or maybe a third set of prayer, you know, where you're going through prayer, you know, and you say it to yourself again. These things can really help you out if you're willing to live in a world where you minimize the amount of things you need to do today when it comes to your life. If your life has been so monumental that you feel like you're behind, I can't just clean my desk all at once. I got to start one thing at a time. No different than that saying, you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So just keep that in mind going forward, that it's one item at a time on your list. And I can tell you right now, oftentimes you have to get your house in order, so to speak, in order to be good or great at advertising. Because if you've got all this other stuff on your mind, all this other stuff bagging you, you know, holding you down, this baggage holding you down, bogging you down, you're not going to get to the marketing. So the other thing is, don't feel like you need to market 8 hours a day. There's no reason why you can't market for 8 minutes and then take an hour and do stuff and then come back and market for 8 minutes more or 15 minutes more or 30 minutes more, and start to get to that point where you're starting to work that marketing muscle, like working a bicep or working a trap or working a delt or working a pec or working your calf muscle. Never would you just sit there and do 10 million calf raises to get back in shape. It would take you 6, 8, 10 weeks to get those calf muscles used to that, or your biceps or your triceps or your chest, your abs, whatever. So why would you think for a moment that you could go from 8 miles an hour to 80 miles an hour when it comes to marketing? So just bite off a little bit each day, and then pretty soon bite off a little bit more. But put that down as a goal and make sure that whatever you do, it's an obtainable goal. Because if it's unattainable now, then it's probably a medium-term goal or a long-term goal. And so you should just work on it a little bit, put it aside, and then the sum of the parts will make the whole. Now it's 35 years later, and Vincent and I have retired from Ford. All right? But, I mean, we just don't go to work, Vincent, at $40 an hour on the assembly line and retire this tomorrow after one day. This takes these women and men 30, 40, 50 years to be able to get those goals. But what's so funny is how many times I see people comparing themselves to others. Like a great example, if you compared yourself to my ex-wife right now, 2 months ago, she had about 80 grand to her name. She was living off of her husband, who's a wealthy guy. But now here it is, 63 days later, she's got her dad's $6.7 million that finally was released from probate court. She got the check. And now guess where she is? Because she's, quote unquote, been so repressed for so many years, they're in Europe. And they're gone for 6 months. And I started laughing when she texted me and got there and landed. And I said, I wonder how long this money will last. You see, folks, it's going to take discipline. It's going to take self-control, or that money will be gone in a New York minute. Because when you're living those types of trips, a trip to Europe for that many months, hell, they might spend 40, 50, 100, 200 grand. You never know. Come on, she's sitting on almost $7 million. So you got to be really careful with these energies. You got to be really careful with your talent from the standpoint that if you're gonna wave your magic wand, you're going to want to wave your magic wand in the areas that you want to be involved in. All right. And at the same time, don't expect that magic wand to get you to where you want to be immediately, unless of course it's something as simple as going out to get the paper, or as simple as going out to get the mail. That would be a short-term goal. So you might want to break your goals down to short-term goals, medium-term goals, long-term goals, and there's no reason why you can't break those goals out for your family, for your wife, for your children, for your husband, your goals for your dogs, your goals for your relationship with God, your relationship with yourself, your relationship from a marketing standpoint. Each of these areas depend on you to have goals in mind for them. So anyway, I'm sorry for running long at the tooth. I want to thank you all for joining us very much. I hope you have a wonderful day and a great week. It's so good to see your faces. Looking forward to seeing you back here next week on Monday. Kashi and Elaine and Sam and Ricardo and Keith and Vincent. That big smile, Vincent. Let's see that smile, brother.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you very much.
That's not Elaine. Oh, it is Elaine. There you are, Elaine.
Yeah.
Right on. Good to see you.
Thank you, Brett.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Keith. Bye, Sam. Take care, man. Yeah, take care. Thanks, Darius. Thanks again, man.
Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Darius. We'll get this out to you here in a little bit, everybody. Have a great day. Have a great week.
All right.
Love all of you. Have a great day, man.
Have a good one.
Take care. Yeah, bye-bye now. Go get them. Thanks for joining us.